How's it going, everyone? Happy Friday. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about the top 5 wide receivers in the upcoming draft class that I see a good fit for the Green Bay Packers. So this isn't my top 5 overall wide receivers in the upcoming draft class. It's more so the top 5 that I see that could work with the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, the Packers have their certain thresholds. They have their certain needs at wide receiver. They have a big need at slot wide receiver, and they could also use an outside guy as well. So if you do see some missing wide receivers on here from this upcoming draft class, it's simply because I just don't feel they really fit in Green Bay. It's not that they're not a good wide receiver. I obviously wanted to make this because wide receiver is a big need for the Green Bay Packers, and I do believe they address it early. I think the irony of the situation is the moment Aaron Rodgers is gone, they could even potentially finally draft a wide receiver in the first round. And if they don't, I still see the Green Bay Packers drafting 2 wide receivers, one early, one middle round. So they need to address that. I think they need to bring in a veteran as well. So I thought I'll start off this series with the position of wide receiver because it is so important for this upcoming draft class for the Packers to get, talented guys from this class. And I also wanted to make this to kind of give you guys a better idea of the wide receivers the Packers may themselves be looking at, considering they have their own thresholds, usually draft wide receivers over 6 foot, and usually draft really good athletic wide receivers, all of which are both of those today. And if you are a new viewer here, I'd really appreciate it if you went down and clicked the subscribe button. It supports my channel a ton. I do everything Packers here on this channel, news, analysis, updates from the draft, free agency, salary cap, all here right on this channel. So if that does interest you, go down and click subscribe. All right, so I'm going to start in terms of where I think these wide receivers will be drafted. So for number 1, we have Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State. JSN is a 6 foot, 196 pound wide receiver, ran a 4.52 40-yard dash, and has an RAS of 8.34. As for his pros, he's a pure slot wide receiver, which the Packers need. He played mainly slot at Ohio State. He has great hands, really soft hands, doesn't drop the ball too often. He's kind of the quarterback's best friend. He is a deep threat. He takes the top off a defense out of that slot position. He's a good route runner. He showed great route running ability there at Ohio State, and he's also a good blocker, being only 6 foot, 196 pounds. He's shown he's a very, very capable blocker at wide receiver, which we know the Packers love. As for his cons, he's not crazy athletic. JSN's a good athlete, but not a great athlete. None of his measurables or anything of that sort really wow you. He's not super fast. He's not super quick. He's just not super athletic, but all around, he's a good football player. Another con is the hamstring injury he suffered last year in the 2022 season. Barely played because of it. I think he appeared in 3 games. We saw before that the production he put up in 2021, probably the best receiver in the country, and that's with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave also on the team. So the hamstring injury, I guess, is still a worry. I'm personally not worried about it, but hamstring injuries do linger, so I could see why teams would either A, remove him off the board because of that, or kind of go into it a little bit worrisome about that hamstring injury. And then finally, I also have only slot for a con. So I have pure slot as a pro, but I have only slot as a con because if you want a wide receiver that you want to be able to move around, do multiple things with, if you're not really needing a slot wide receiver, which the Packers do, but they like to run different types of offenses. So if it's a guy that can only purely play slot wide receiver, that might, defer them a little bit. I don't think it will. I mean, they have players like Randall Cobb, who's a pure slot wide receiver, or they had players like Randall Cobb, and they need that. They need another player just like that. They need a guy to come in to be that pure slot wide receiver in this offense, that go-to guy for Jordan Love on third downs across the middle of the field. And I think JSN is exactly that. His value is in the first round. I don't see him making it past 15. I would be pretty surprised if he does make it to 15. It's kind of up in the air right now whether or not JSN or Quentin Johnson will be the first wide receiver off the board. I think if the Green Bay Packers really want JSN, they're going to have to trade up to get him, and I think it would be worth it. I think he would add a whole different asset to this offense. You have Christian Watson on the outside, which makes JSN even more interesting because you have such a great deep threat, a burner on the outside. Then you'd have JSN in the slot. You could have Romeo Doubs at the other wide receiver spot. You have Samori Toure and Bo Melton as depth guys. Adding JSN and then a veteran into this group, I think could really change the outlook on this wide receiver room right now. So if the Packers decide to trade up, or hey, he's even sitting there at 15, I think you run that card up. You select JSN with your first round draft selection if you're Brian Gutekunst and the Green Bay Packers. For the second wide receiver on this list, another wide receiver I know a lot of people like, that is Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, a 6 foot, 176 pound wide receiver, ran a 4.40, 40, has blazing speed and an RAS of 8.75. Here's another wide receiver that could also go in the first round. So these are the only 2 that I think could go in the first round. A lot of people are all over the board for Jalen Hyatt. Some people are saying the Packers could even pick him at 15, which I like him a lot, but I'm not sure I really like him for 15. I like him maybe in the back end of the first, early second round. That's where I kind of see Jalen Hyatt sitting. So say if the Packers draft someone at 15 and then trade into the top of the second like they did with Christian Watson and maybe select Jalen Hyatt there. As for his pros, elite speed. I mean, this dude is a complete burner, one of the faster wide receivers in this draft class. He plays even faster than that 4.4 40. He's a great route runner at that slot position, showed great route running ability there at Tennessee, a deep threat as well, same as JSN. I would say even more so that Jalen Hyatt is a better deep threat out of that slot position. I mean, the dude just burned teams deep so many times over his the last season there. He's also a yak guy, put the ball in his hands, he's going to create yards after the catch, and he's a good blocker, which is surprising given his frame being 6 foot and really light, 176 pounds. Another thing is he could add more weight on it and probably still be as fast. So if a team wanted to be a little bit heavier, I don't think that would be a problem at all. And the fact that he is a good blocker at 176 pounds, shows the fierceness and the competitiveness of Jalen Hyatt. As for the cons here, only 1 year of production, over 1,200 receiving yards last year, but the 2 years prior didn't top 300 yards. So last year he went off. He played super well. I think there was a game against Bama. He had 3 or 4 touchdowns, which is insane, but he only did have the 1 year of production. But I don't think that's a worry to me. And I mean, if you go out and you put this on the tape, your final year going into the draft, that's what I believe you are. You don't have to put up, numbers in your freshman or sophomore year, whatever it may be. It's nice if you have production over multiple years, but I think Jalen Hyatt's going to be an extreme weapon for years to come in the NFL. As for cons, same thing as JSN. He's been purely a slot wide receiver in college. He had a total of 371 snaps in the slot compared to the 51 snaps out wide. So he's going to be a pure deep threat slot wide receiver, very similar to JSN, but more of an athlete in terms of a burner, deep threat, home run type player, where JSN's more of that technical route runner across the middle, soft hands type guy. And as we see here, another con for Jalen Hyatt, limited route tree. I mean, they kind of just sent this guy deep and he would burn people. Like, that's kind of what he did, even against Alabama. So that's what he can do. It's not just a lesser talent and he's just running straight and catching balls. He is a true deep threat and he will beat teams regardless. So he has a limited route tree, like I said, not really running too much of the route tree. As we see here, his value is first/second round. Like I said, I could see him sneaking into the first round, into the 20s or something around there, but I do see him more as an early second round player. So like I said, if the Packers get a defender or whoever at 15 and maybe trade up from whatever the picks they have in the second round, depending on this Aaron Rodgers trade, and then select another wide receiver in the top of the second round, just like last year, if they do that, it should be Jalen Hyatt. For the third wide receiver on this list, we have A.T. Perry from Wake Forest, a very intriguing prospect. I really like this guy. 6'3", 198 pounds, a 4.47 40, and a 9.62 RAS. So now we're starting to get into the outside wide receivers. The next 3 in these lists are outside wide receivers, where the first 2 were the pure slot guys. So the Packers could use both, right? They could play Christian Watson as a big slot. They could put Romeo Doubs in the slot, or maybe even sign a veteran for that slot role, and then get another outside wide receiver to go with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. And I think A.T. Perry would be a great complementary wide receiver to the both of them. He's a great athlete. If we start with his pros here, he is a great athlete. His vertical 40-yard dash, broad jump, just a really great athlete. Really nice contested catching. He had 11 total contested catches in 2022. He is also a deep threat. I mean, this guy, if he was one-on-one, they just kind of throw the ball up and he would come down with it. Very strong hands. Again, repeating on that, throw the ball up, he's going to come down with it. And then also had really good production at Wake Forest. Nearly 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns in 2021, and then 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns in 2022. So this guy, the past 2 seasons, has been one of the better wide receivers in college football and has produced like it. As for his cons, we have low explosion, might struggle against the press, not really a good 10-yard split at all. He's fast, but not quick. So again, on that, not great in terms of a quick cut ability, but straight line speed, he is definitely fast. He's not a great blocker, which is a little upsetting considering he's 6'3", 198 pounds. You'd expect him to be a little bit better of a blocker. And again, he's also not that strong. So it is a little disappointing considering, like I said, with his frame, 6'3", 198 pounds, but it is what it is. As for his value, I have it as a second or third round player. I could easily see A.T. Perry going in the second round, and I could also see him going into early to third round here. I think he's going to be a really nice wide receiver, complementary wide receiver to a number 1 guy at outside wide receiver, and be, a burner, a deep threat, strong hands, can make one-on-one plays, And I think the Packers are missing that. Allen Lazard was kind of that guy where, sometimes it was a possession, type situation where you kind of have to throw the ball up 1v1. And Allen Lazard would sometimes go up and get that ball. A.T. Perry could be that replacement there. For the fourth wide receiver on this list, another outside wide receiver, we have Rasheed Rice from SMU. He's 6'1", 204 pounds, ran a 4.5 140, and has an RAS of 9.53. As for his pros, Rice is a playmaker. You throw him the ball or put the ball in his hands, and then all this guy does is make plays. He has a really good catch radius with long arms. You throw the ball to him over the middle, and he's going to pluck the ball out of the air. Really good possession wide receiver, so kind of coincides with what I said with A.T. Perry. They're kind of missing that, losing Allen Lazard, a pure possession 1v1 type guy on the outside. He's a great route runner, and he also had really, really nice production at SMU. Over 680 yards in 2020 and 2021, then last year jumped all the way up to 1,344 yards and 10 touchdowns. So he's produced pretty good the last 3 seasons and exceptionally well this last season. As for his cons, he's had a limited route tree. SMU running a spread offense. He hasn't had to really dive into the route tree too much. Separation might struggle against press as well, and doesn't have that top end speed or quickness, obviously running a 4.51, but still is a decently fast player. And then the final con, underneath routes. A lot of his yards came from underneath routes at SMU where, he's wide open, caught the ball, and got a lot of yards after the catch. It would have been nice to see more deep routes with Rasheed Rice 1v1 on the outside rather than just all underneath stuff at SMU. As for his value, I have him at a second or third rounder. I see him getting drafted in the third round, but I think he could sneak into the top of the second round. And he's a very similar player to me as A.T. Perry. I think A.T. Perry has a slight edge for me over him due to just the amount of production he had and the type of athlete A.T. Perry is. But Rasheed Rice is a very pro-ready wide receiver, might be one of the best pro-ready wide receivers in this draft class, which is also what the Packers need, right? If they're going to draft a wide receiver, they're probably going to see some snaps very, very early on. So to get a guy that's pro-ready, you can throw him at outside wide receiver opposite Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs, and you can count on him in 1v1 situations and putting the ball in his hands and letting him make a play. Rasheed Rice is exactly that. So I really do like Rasheed Rice in the second or third round, getting a guy as an outside wide receiver opposite Watson and Doubs. For the final wide receiver, number 5 on this list, a very intriguing player, and I want the Packers to draft this guy a lot. That is Iglesias from Princeton, 6'3", 205 pounds, ran a 4.43 40, and has a 9.96 RAS. He checks every single threshold box for the Green Bay Packers. As for his pros, speed. 4.43, 6'3". This guy has the same exact kind of frame and speed combo that we saw from Christian Watson coming out of college last year. Another pro is his catch radius, again, long arms, and will pluck the ball out of there. He also has soft hands, kind of a quarterback's best friend type of guy. Doesn't drop the ball too much. A good route runner, ran the whole route tree there at Princeton, and also a strong runner. Whether that's tracking down a ball or with the ball in his hands, he's a very, very strong runner. As for his cons, he played in the Ivy League, so, the competition he played against was lesser, and he still didn't produce that much, under 1,000 yards both last 2 seasons. But then again, you're still beating players, right? Now, all the competition he's playing, are they really going to be NFL caliber players? No, they're not. But you cannot deny his athletic ability, his frame, his size. And then also he does struggle against press coverage, so it's something he's going to have to work on going into the NFL. As for his value, I have him as a 3rd or 4th round. I know some websites have him as like a 5th or 6th. I keep saying this. I don't see him passing the 4th round. I could even see him sneaking into the 3rd round for a team like the Green Bay Packers if they were to reach kind of in the 3rd round, which they always end up doing, and they have that horrible stigma around their 3rd rounder, so I don't like them doing that. But if a team were to reach on him and get him in the 3rd round, I feel like it would be the Green Bay Packers, but I'm comfortable selecting Iglesias in that 4th round. If he were to fall to the 5th, I think it's an absolute steal. I do think he's going to be a good wide receiver in the NFL. He might not be ready right away, but he is an outside guy, a pure deep threat. You need those guys on your roster. We still have Christian Watson, but adding another guy like this, I think would be awesome. So that does it for the top 5 wide receivers I see fitting for the Green Bay Packers in this upcoming NFL draft. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Which one of these guys would you want the most? Also, is there other wide receivers that maybe I didn't include on this list, maybe in later rounds or something of that sort? Also, let me know down in the comments below. But that about does it for this video. I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Pack Go.